Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the Adventure Academy of Adventure, designed by Scott McClintock, Marc Altfuldisch, and Kathleen Harrington for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. And if you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. So one of the challenges in D&D is, how do we get our player characters together? You know, often we're a very diverse group of like mercenaries basically trying to take on work. And how do you kick off a campaign? Basically, how do you start it and hopefully avoid the you all meet in a tavern trope, or you all happen to sign up for the same job kind of a thing. And I think the school can be a really fun hook. Now, we just recently had Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos release, which is another school-based adventure specifically for magic. This one, the Academy of Adventure, is located in the Forgotten Realms. It's near Mirabar, I believe. And it's for everybody, which I think is a cool hook for starting an adventure. It is designed for level 1, and you will reach level 3 by the end, which, you know, a lot of the main 5e campaign books, they don't really begin until you get to more like level 3. So I think it does a good job of providing an introductory experience for D&D, especially if you are a newcomer to D&D, because it goes over a lot of things like, you know, rolling skills and how to deal combat and different combat actions you can take. And it might seem a little too tutorializing for veterans, but it also includes a lot of neat events and encounters with, I think, a pretty good balance of you know, all the pillars of D&D: combat, exploration, and social role-playing. It's 50 pages and divided into 4 chapters, including an introduction, which introduces the entire academy. The actual faculty isn't that memorable, but I did like the student body, the fellow students that you're attending with. So you know, all the player characters, this is a school for young adults who have already, you know, it'd be interesting if you had a school that you start at like level 0 and you had to actually train to become even a level 1 at your profession. This one doesn't do that. You'll still start at level 1, but you will make level 3 by the time you're doing the final exam. But you're already kind of grouped up into different parties, and then you've got all these separate party groups that you can deal with. And they're kind of a really fun bunch. There's like the partying marauders who just, you know, not necessarily like evil or chaotic, but they just definitely want to party and drink all the time, which we all knew that group. Maybe you were that group in school. The Iconics are just kind of your somewhat generic, like, good guy group that's very much supposed to mirror a player character party. The Demo Dragons are your classic villainous, like, arrogant, just douchebag assholes. I really like the Kobold group. Meepo's Minions is a fun idea. We are given some details on these students and even some artwork and things in the end. In fact, let's go ahead and skip to the appendix. You can see that. The only one that's really given a lot of unique stat blocks are the Iconics, because they appear in at least one of the encounters, and possibly during the big kind of twist ending, which is an option that I'll cover in a bit. I do like this art and these details for all these students, though. It's a fun idea, even though this is not Strixhaven. This is not a big sprawling, you know, campaign of, you know, all these different semesters and a huge variety of like dozens of NPCs. You know, this is a much more humble academy that consists of just maybe half a dozen buildings. There's you know, training grounds with little training dummies. There's a zoo with exotic creatures. There's a library. There's a barracks. There's a classroom. And that's basically it. That's, you know, it's a walled compound. And then like there's an illusory pit that the teachers use to, you know, teleport you to different scenarios where you do all these different encounters that kind of make it so you're actually doing something during each semester, I guess. And I think there's supposed to be a twist that these encounters are actually all illusory based, but I'm not sure it even actually matters whether you're really there or not, other than the fact that there's no real danger involved, which again, it kind of makes me feel like this is a good introductory, like, baby steps kind of a thing for folks that may be new, including maybe a DM who are new to D&D, and it just makes it easier to kind of get your feet wet in terms of how to go about different scenarios. And I do think the events do a good job of providing, here's a more stealthy situation, here's a more traditional dungeon crawl. We don't have one that's purely social based, but at least in a lot of these situations, you do have opportunities for social encounters. And obviously, when you're doing the school itself, you're dealing with all these students and interacting with the teachers and things. There are some neat ideas with the extracurriculars included in the introduction, which, are basically adventure hooks that you can think about different things, like the zoo animals. There's escape, and you have to get them back. Or maybe one of the students has this powerful artifact that you have to deal with. Or maybe there's a mimic somewhere that a student's desk is a mimic that you have to fight. Just, cool little ideas. Chapter 1, the first semester, covers combat, which is kind of tutorial and kind of just the DM just, the designer really says, hey, we're just going to, cover combat. And there's no real like event or scenario with that. It's not like they're, okay, now lead them out and do this. It's just kind of, hey, just tell them about how the combat works, which, a lot of us forget about how 5e combat, we forget we can take the ready action, or that you can drop prone, which is actually a good thing if you're being shot at with arrows, or, you can use cover to work. It is nice to be able to go over that stuff, but there's not really an event or like a combat encounter that actually like strictly tutorializes combat. So it feels like it's a lot of the burden on how to run this section is given to the DM, which is kind of a bummer. And then the actual encounter each of these semesters includes a kind of a big event thing. Is also a little disappointing. It's entirely the students do this on their own. They're like, hey, there's this, kind of hazing almost ritual that everybody needs to do, which is you go down beneath the academy and you fight a bunch of killer frogs in basically what is like a survival horde mode event, where you go down there and then these frogs, which is this, I'm not sure if this is actual frog stat or not, it's just a killer frog, which is a slightly, it's kind of a goblin stat with way worse armor class. They do have pack tactics, though, and a pretty small bite. You're level 1, so you don't want to deal with too much. And it's just how many can you kill? You just survive. There's no real, I don't know. There's not, it's a pretty basic combat scenario that is only, there's no penalty for failing, but there is some, I guess, bonus for winning. It's just kind of all competitive thing. It's fine. I'm glad the other ones are a lot better because I just didn't think that one was particularly compelling. What I did enjoy at chapter 2 this semester, now this time they actually do go over, okay, here's how we're going to do skill checks and skill challenges. And this time, you've got to like run through a bunch of mushroom fields in the Underdark. And that's a bunch of different, skill checks you have to make, or you have to cram for a bunch of, medicine checks and all these things, which is a series of skill checks. So it does a better job of making it easier to actually run and how to, handle these things. And it feels like a classroom dynamic. And then the scenario is really cool because one of the, during, I think, the Mushroom Running Underdark event or something, somebody finds a cave that's an evil cave of evil undead crap. Well, the Iconics go there, and your group, of course, sets out to rescue them. And it's a nice little, fun dungeon crawl with some interesting little twists on low-level creatures. You don't have to deal with the usual, goblins or kobolds and stuff. Instead, you're fighting. There's like a giant spider, kind of a mini boss. There's an ogre skeleton, a skeletal ogre, which is fun. These shadow bats, which is a neat way of making the pretty scary shadow creature into a more palatable. I think we're level 2 by now, if I remember. Yeah, we're level 2, so you can do a little bit more. So I thought it was a nice, it's a nice little dungeon crawl, and it checks all those boxes. You're rescuing the Iconic, so that's got your social part of it. I think it's perfectly fine. And we do have, by the way, full color battle maps for these encounters, which is a huge plus. These are given separate player versions as well. And the other event, I guess we have 2 in second semester, don't we? Is infiltrating this drow compound, which is nice because it's basically a stealth social situation rather than a strict dungeon crawl, which we just had. This is the actual final exam, I guess, or midterm for the second semester. The social aspect is through the Lamia that the drow are using. You can meet her and try to kind of rescue her, but she's compelled to like not tell you about her collar that's making her enslaved to the drow. And she can give you information if you help her. And then you have to infiltrate, which is a cool stealth situation, this little drow compound to rescue the people and basically give this one MacGuffin item to one of the prisoners. And then that basically completes this scenario. You're given a really almost a hilarious amount of this huge sidebar right here. Gives you like all this information about that you normally would never get. You're almost skipping the investigation part of it in order to just jump into this kind of Mission Impossible style situation. But again, it's neat because you're low level and you're being transported to this very exotic area. Although again, I think it's supposed to all be illusory, but it doesn't really matter. Other than the fact that I guess the reason it's illusory is because you can't actually like fail and fuck up. Basically, like if you really like just shit the bed and you do horrible and you have a team wipe, then your whole team is just kind of like, well, you failed the exam, but we're still going to continue on anyway, and you're teleported out of there. So it just kind of creates a safety net. I will say there's a nice little bit of investigation involved. I kind of skipped over it with the, I believe it's the Caves of Shadow. So when I mentioned the Iconics, going missing, you actually have to do some legwork to discover where they went. You have to go around to different faculties and kind of research the fact of where they went and figure out how to get there. So that solves the kind of exploration pillar fairly well. And then we've got the final exam. So we've made it to 3rd level. And this time we're given another, like, just the teacher's like, hey, here's the situation. We're going to teleport you to where it's like a cult of Orcus cultists trying to summon like evil shit into the world, and you got to go stop them. So, on the one hand, these are all fun, cool scenarios, and I appreciate. And this one is very cool. The boss has some really cool abilities, kind of a low-level mage, but he's got bonus actions where he can heal himself by like drawing energy from this portal that he's summoning this tentacled creature through, or he can like heal the skeletons that are around, and the tentacles through the portals can attack people, with their range and stuff. It's a really neat combat scenario. None of these encounters really have anything to do with each other, and there is no real overarching story. So, if you've seen my review of Strixhaven, I did complain about the first half of that campaign, the first 2 of the 4 semesters, and that how the adventures didn't feel very exciting. But they are all linked together. They do all build upon one another, and the main villain has been doing things since the first one, and you do get to fight the villain at the end. So it does build towards this overarching storyline. That's not at all what this one does, which I thought was a missed opportunity to create some kind of maybe like the Demo Dragons come up with some scheme, and they've been behind a lot of these things and changing things along, whatever. But there is nothing like that. It's just like, hey, we're just going to give you these series of events. Now, these are cool encounters, and I think they're really neat. They offer some neat, this one's basically just a pure combat final exam, but it's fun. If your players like, dungeon hacking D&D, I think it's a really fun scenario. And again, that, the Caves of Shadow was a fun little dungeon crawl, and the Drow compound was a neat little stealth situation. You do some investigation work. All that stuff works very well. It's just that none of them are linked together or actually tell a major story. There's no real big villain at the end of everything. I mean, this one had its own villain, but they're not all tied together. So it doesn't feel like you're, telling this story. It just feels like, okay, we're at this academy. We're just doing a bunch of hijinks and events and encounters, and then we're graduating at the end, which, again, those individual stories and encounters and events are cool. I just thought that they really could have been linked together to try to create an ongoing storyline. And I think for all of the faults that I had for Strixhaven, they did actually accomplish that, where it does feel like each one of those builds towards another event. Yes, thank you for the phone call. And I think it's just a missed opportunity to be able to do that. The graduation isn't really a thing. There's no real event here in Chapter 4, except for the big twist event, which is crazy. So if you notice at the very top of this product, it's still called Academy of Adventure, but it says Doomed Forgotten Realms Volume 1. So you can play this whole thing pretty much straight legitimately, which is what I've explained. You're a regular group of adventurers. You're going through all these encounters events. You're learning, useful stuff like combat and skill checks and how to do all that. And you're going on these nice little encounters. You're dealing with the student body. All that's great. You can also play this batshit crazy twist thing where it turns out the entire academy is fucking evil as hell, and they're all like, it's a school like for Vecna or something, who's a very big, I think, a lich villain of D&D lore, and they're like all the students are like created from Vecna or something, and it's the final graduation is a twist where you have to then fight the Iconics, which is your kind of, the good guy venturing party whom you've been rescuing and dealing with, and probably has been, good buddies of your party members. You have to kill like shadow versions of them, and you're forced to kill them. And then at the end, they're all like, Vecna, Vecna prevails, Vecna prevails. And then it just ends, and then you have to get doomed Forgotten Realms Volume 2, which I think is still coming. It's tough for me to judge on this because it does end on a cliffhanger, and you need the second volume. Basically, this is a way to run the designer's specific ideas, which I'm glad it's framed as like an optional variant and not like here's what you do next, because it's very crazy, and the right group could appreciate it a lot if you want to run like a dark, crazy campaign. But the rest of the campaign is very much like, new player friendly and neophyte friendly and everything. So I would not do the crazy like Vecna, you're all actually evil and you have to fight this other good adventuring party and you're just forced to do that and you lose your agency to even choose that and all that. Like, that would not be a good thing to do for new players. So it's a weird dichotomy there where like I think it is good for new players, but then they add this extra twist, which would only be good if you've actually got like veterans who want to run maybe like a more evil themed campaign, which is not something you would ever suggest to new DMs or new players. It's an interesting idea. I'm glad it's optional, and I can't comment much on where the story is going because I just don't know. So if you're wondering what that whole Doomed Forgotten Realms thing, that's what it is. There's this crazy batshit twist about you are all actually minions of Vecna. We've been like grooming you to become, soldiers in the Vecna army or something like that. And you're supposed to literally kill this other adventuring party in order to survive to make it up to that level. So it's pretty crazy. It's interesting, but it's not really going to be a pro or a con because you need part 2 to be able to continue along that story. All right, let's go over speaking of which, pros and cons for the Academy of Adventure. Pro, interesting low-level monsters and detailed NPCs to interact with. So I wish the other student body other members had given as much attention as the Iconics, but I appreciate that we are given a Dramatis Personae at the beginning. We're given all these cool artwork of, at least, was it the Iconics and Marauders? Some kind of detailed notes about all these different student groups, and stat blocks for the Iconics. And then you've also got some cool enemy types with the especially with the Cave of Shadow, with the Shadow Bats, the Ogre Skeleton. It doesn't do the usual low level giant rats and goblins and kobolds thing. It really feels like it goes outside the box and gives you fun situations. That one CR3 cultist boss was really cool. I really appreciate, I appreciate when people construct neat boss events that are still relatively balanced for low level. That's what I really like to see. Even if you're just going to use variants of existing creatures or monsters, that's probably what you should do, right? That's totally fine. But it also is nice for veteran players because they can't metagame that knowledge of like, oh yeah, I've seen the goblin boss stat block before, I know what we're up against. That kind of thing. It's hard to divorce yourself from that. So I do think it's really fun that we get a lot of these very neat, memorable NPCs to interact with from the student, the more social NPC, and then actual enemies to battle. Pro, excellent character art and full color battle maps. I think it's a great presentation, and the production value looks awesome. I appreciate all this art and the artwork of the characters especially, and the battle maps is a big thumbs up for me. And pro, solid balance of combat encounters, investigation, and role-playing. Thankfully, once we get out of Chapter 1, I think it does a pretty good job of breaking up that action. You've got your social events with interacting with all the student body, especially those extracurricular activities, give you a lot of fun adventure hooks, and including all those characters. There's some nice investigation, especially with that one Cave of Shadow, but also with the Drow compound. And then some role-playing events throughout, and combat encounters, a lot of combat encounters, which I think is a big part of D&D, and it's appropriate here. So a good balance of all those things, which I'm always looking for in these adventures. My only real con is what I mentioned with the lack of a overarching plot. There's a lack of cohesion between all these different semesters and events. It really feels like these are all just kind of one-off challenges, which I think they're good, but there's just a missed opportunity for linking those together and creating a satisfying build-up to a story. And again, if you want a good example of that, I think even though Strixhaven isn't necessarily a great adventure from beginning to end, it does create a linked adventure of having those events in the context of a school backdrop setting. Final verdict, though it's no Strixhaven, the Academy Adventure provides a solid introductory D&D 5e experience and a fine way to kick off a campaign with memorable NPCs, helpful combat tutorials, and interesting encounters. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. And you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.